My life shattered the moment I saw those messages. I never thought Sarah would betray me after 5 years of marriage. What was supposed to be our forever became my greatest pain. The decision to disappear without warning was not easy, but it felt like my only escape from the lies. I had no idea my ghosting would cause such chaos, or that everyone would blame me instead of the one who actually broke our vows. Trước khi tôi kể cho bạn về cách Sarah đã phản bội tôi và cách mọi người đổ lỗi cho tôi, hãy cho tôi biết bạn đang xem từ đâu và đừng quên nhấn subscribe để theo dõi những câu chuyện thực tế về cuộc sống hôn nhân. Sarah and I met 8 years ago at a summer music festival in New York. I was 35 working as a software engineer for a tech startup, and she was 32, a financial advisor with an infectious laugh and stunning green eyes. The connection was instant. That night, as the band played under the stars, we talked until security asked everyone to leave. There was something magnetic about her intelligence, beauty, and social grace that pulled me in completely. Our relationship progressed quickly after that. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. Sarah had this way of bringing light into every room. My friends loved her, my family adored her, and I found myself falling deeper in love with each passing day. After 2 years of dating, we took a 3-week trip to Europe. Walking along the Seine in Paris with the Eiffel Tower glittering in the background, I got down on one knee and proposed. The joy in her eyes when she said yes is something I thought would sustain me for a lifetime. We had a small but intimate wedding at a beachfront venue in Cape Cod. Just 60 guests, our closest friends and family. Sarah wore a simple white dress that made her look like she had stepped out of a dream. We wrote our own vows, promising eternal fidelity and partnership. Those words would later haunt me. After the wedding, we settled in Boston, where we both had good jobs. We bought a charming brownstone with a small garden where Sarah planted herbs and flowers. We talked about starting a family within the next year or two. Everything seemed perfect. We had a comfortable routine that felt like home. Our mornings began with coffee together on our small balcony when weather permitted. On weekends, we would jog along the Charles River, sometimes stopping to watch rowing teams practice. Evenings were our favorite time. We would cook dinner together, Sarah chopping vegetables, while I handled the main course, and we would talk about our day, sharing successes and frustrations. We had traditions that made our marriage feel special. Every anniversary, we would return to the restaurant where we had our first Boston date. For birthdays, we surprised each other with experiences rather than gifts. Life was predictable in the best possible way, or so I thought. The first signs of trouble were subtle, so slight I almost convinced myself I was imagining things. About a year ago, Sarah started working later at the office. At first, it was once or twice a week. Then it became 3 or 4 nights. When she came home, she seemed distant, checking her phone constantly. Our dinner conversations shifted. Instead of sharing details about her day, Sarah would give vague responses. When I asked about specific clients or projects, she would say, "Nothing interesting happened," or "just the usual boring financial stuff." This from a woman who used to excitedly tell me about market trends and investment strategies. Her appearance changed too. She bought new clothes more stylish and expensive than her usual professional attire. Her makeup became more noticeable, and she changed her hairstyle, adding highlights that framed her face beautifully. While she had always taken care of herself, this felt different, like she was trying to impress someone. The most telling change was with her phone. Sarah, who had always been open with her device, suddenly added a new password. When I asked about it casually, she claimed it was for work security. She began to position her phone screen away from me when texting and would take calls in another room, something she had never done before. Despite these warning signs, I tried to maintain trust. I told myself she was just going through a phase, or perhaps dealing with work stress. I convinced myself that marriages have ups and downs, and this was simply a down period we would work through. I never confronted her directly about my suspicions because I feared being labeled as jealous or controlling. Instead, I tried to be more attentive, suggesting date nights and weekend getaways, which she often declined due to work commitments. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my instincts sooner. The signs were all there, but sometimes we choose to be blind to the things that would hurt us most to see. The night I discovered the truth remains burned in my memory. It was a Tuesday evening in September. Sarah was taking a shower, and her phone left on the kitchen counter buzzed repeatedly. I had never been the type to check her messages, but something felt different this time. The notification preview showed a text from Jake from accounting that read, "Miss you already. Lunch tomorrow, same place." My heart raced as I picked up her phone. The screen was locked, but I knew her birthday would still open it despite the new password she claimed to have. When the phone unlocked, what I saw confirmed my worst fears. The conversation with Jake was explicit. Messages like, "Today was amazing. Can still feel your lips on mine? And can we meet at the hotel again on Friday? I will book the same room, left no room for interpretation." There were intimate photos exchanged that made me physically ill. As I scrolled up, I discovered their affair had been going on for 7 months, almost the entire time Sarah had been working late. With shaking hands, I checked her email and found hotel confirmations, secret meeting arrangements, and even a dedicated email thread where they planned a weekend getaway disguised as a work conference. Looking through her, Snapchat revealed more evidence, including videos I could not bring myself to watch. Her call history showed daily conversations with Jake, often right after she would text me that she was heading into a meeting. I put the phone down exactly where I had found it before Sarah finished her shower. I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. The woman I had built my life around, the person I trusted most in the world, had been living a double life. 7 months of lies, deception, and betrayal, while I worked to be a supportive husband. The emotional tsunami that followed was overwhelming. At first came shock, a numbing disbelief that made everything seem unreal. Then pain crashed over me, physical in its intensity, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it burst. Anger followed, white-hot and all-consuming, making my hands shake and my vision blur. Finally, a profound sense of loss and emptiness, as if the future I had planned had been erased in an instant. I spent the night pretending everything was normal, lying beside the stranger my wife had become. As she slept, I stared at the ceiling, considering my options. A traditional confrontation and divorce seemed like the obvious path, but something inside me resisted. The thought of listening to her excuses, watching her try to manipulate the situation, or worse, beg for forgiveness for something so calculated and prolonged, was unbearable. That is when the idea of ghosting entered my mind. I had never considered myself capable of such an action, but the circumstances felt extreme enough to warrant it. I needed space to process my emotions without her influence. I wanted to avoid the drama of a confrontation where she would likely twist the truth or try to blame me for her choices. Most importantly, I needed to reclaim some control in a situation where I felt completely powerless. My decision solidified when Sarah mentioned she would be attending a 3-day financial conference in Chicago that weekend. This would give me the perfect opportunity to disappear without immediate detection. I began forming a plan, methodical in its execution despite my emotional turmoil. The next 3 days were a carefully orchestrated pretense. I went to work as usual, maintaining normal conversations with Sarah at home. Behind this facade, I was preparing for my exit. I visited my bank during lunch breaks, opening a new account and transferring half of our joint savings. I gathered important documents, birth certificate, passport, insurance policies, and stored them in a secure location. I found a month-to-month furnished apartment across the city, paying the first 2 months up front in cash. When Friday came, and Sarah left for her conference, which I now suspected might involve Jake, I took action. I packed only essential clothing, personal items with sentimental value, and my electronics. I was deliberate about what I took, wanting to avoid any accusation of stealing shared property. Our wedding photos and gifts remained untouched. The furniture, appliances, and most household items stayed in place. The most symbolic gesture came last. I removed my wedding ring, placing it on top of our dresser where she would easily find it. I considered leaving a note but decided against it. What could I possibly write that would convey the depth of this betrayal? The absence of explanation would speak volumes. Before leaving, I deactivated all my social media accounts. I changed my phone number, setting up a new one that only my workplace would have. I even created a new email address, severing all easy methods of contact. I informed my office that I was dealing with a personal matter and would be working remotely for several weeks without providing details. As I walked out of our brownstone for the last time carrying only 2 suitcases of possessions from a 5-year marriage, I felt an impossible mix of emotions. The devastating pain of betrayal still throbbed, but alongside it was a strange sense of liberation. By choosing to disappear rather than confront, I was rejecting the power of her betrayal to dictate my reactions. Walking away was both the hardest and easiest thing I had ever done. The fallout began faster than I anticipated. Within 24 hours of Sarah returning home to find me gone, my old phone had over 40 missed calls and dozens of text messages. They started confused, became worried, and eventually turned angry. "Where are you?" became, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And finally, "How could you do this to me?" My new email inbox filled with messages from Sarah. The subject lines evolved from, "Please contact me," to, "This is not funny, Ronald," to, "You are destroying me." I read them all but responded to none. In her messages, she claimed to have no idea why I had left, positioning herself as the victim of an inexplicable abandonment. Not once did she mention Jake or acknowledge any wrongdoing, confirming my decision to avoid a confrontation filled with lies. What I had not fully anticipated was Sarah's determination to find me and her willingness to involve everyone in our lives in the search. Within days, she had contacted my parents in Arizona, telling them I had disappeared without explanation and suggesting I might be having a mental breakdown. My father, a retired military officer who valued directness and responsibility, called my workplace demanding information. Fortunately, my manager respected my privacy, only confirming that I was still employed and working remotely. My sister Julia called every mutual friend trying to locate me, leaving voicemails that swung between concern and disappointment. "Whatever's going on, you do not just walk away from a marriage without a word," she said. "Mom and Dad raised us better than this." Her words stung, but I remained committed to my silence. Sarah did not stop with family. She contacted every friend I had, spreading her version of events. According to her, we had been perfectly happy, and my disappearance was completely unprovoked. Many believed her. Messages came in from people I had known for years, expressing everything from concern for my mental health to outright condemnation of my character. The social fallout was extensive. Mutual friends took sides, and predictably, most chose Sarah. Without knowing the full story and seeing only her apparent devastation, they concluded I was the villain. Social media posts appeared describing me as selfish, immature, and cruel. Friends I had known since college blocked me or sent final messages expressing their disappointment before cutting contact. My parents, who had always liked Sarah, were torn between concern for me and disbelief at my actions. During a rare phone call I made to them using my new number, my mother cried, asking what Sarah could possibly have done to deserve such treatment. Unable and unwilling to share the humiliating details of her infidelity, I simply said we had irreconcilable differences. This vague explanation only damaged my standing further. The situation escalated when Sarah somehow discovered where I worked remotely. 6 weeks after I left, she appeared at the co-worker's house where I occasionally used a spare office. The confrontation that followed was public and chaotic. Sarah alternated between tears and rage, demanding answers, while my colleague watched in stunned silence. I managed to keep my composure, asking her to leave, which she eventually did, but not before creating a scene that became office gossip for weeks. The most challenging blow came when my boss called me for a meeting. "Your personal situation is affecting the workplace," he said. "Clients are asking questions after Sarah called the main office number repeatedly. We need this resolved." I was given a warning that my job could be at risk if the disruptions continued, adding professional stress to my already overwhelming personal situation. The climax of Sarah's meltdown came at the birthday party of our mutual friend Alex, which I had naturally not attended. According to texts I received afterward, Sarah had arrived emotionally unstable and had a complete breakdown after several glasses of wine. She publicly detailed my abandonment, crying so hard she could barely speak, telling everyone I had disappeared without warning or reason, portraying herself as the bewildered, heartbroken wife. What no one at that party knew, not even Alex, was that Jake from accounting had also been invited as someone's +1. According to a former coworker who remained loyal to me, Jake looked uncomfortable throughout Sarah's performance but said nothing to contradict her narrative. The social pressure reached its peak when a carefully crafted post appeared on Sarah's Facebook page, a 1,000-word account of our relationship and my disappearance. The post, which was shared hundreds of times among our social circle, portrayed her as a devoted wife, blindsided by an inexplicable abandonment. She carefully constructed a narrative that highlighted my apparent mental instability and her own innocence, asking people to help her understand what had happened to our perfect marriage. The comment section filled with support for her and condemnation for me. Even people who barely knew us felt entitled to weigh in, calling me everything from coward to sociopath. The public shaming was extensive and effective. Within our community, I had become a pariah without ever telling my side of the story. The isolation was intense. Living in a sparsely furnished apartment, cut off from most friends and family, doubting my decision despite knowing the truth. There were moments when the social pressure became so overwhelming that I questioned whether I should have just confronted Sarah, directly endured the lies and manipulation, and moved on in a more socially acceptable way. But each time I considered breaking my silence, I would remember those messages to Jake, the calculated deception, and I would recommit to my path. After 2 months of silence, with the social pressure mounting and my own need for closure growing, I decided it was time to reclaim my narrative. The ghosting had served its purpose, giving me space to process my emotions without manipulation, but now it was becoming counterproductive. I needed to end the speculation and lies, not for Sarah's benefit but for my own peace, and to preserve the relationships worth saving. I contacted Sarah via email, suggesting we meet at a neutral coffee shop downtown. Her reply was almost instantaneous, a mix of relief, anger, and lingering questions. When the day arrived, I came prepared both emotionally and with evidence. I had screenshots of her conversations with Jake, email receipts, and even location data showing her visits to a hotel that coincided with her supposed late nights at work. Sarah arrived, looking both anxious and indignant, her appearance more disheveled than I remembered. When she saw me, her expression cycled through multiple emotions: relief, anger, and a strange flicker of guilt, quickly masked by righteous indignation. "You have put me through hell," were her first words, spoken loudly enough that nearby patrons turned to look. 2 months without a word. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? To our families? Everyone thinks you had some kind of breakdown." I remained calm, letting her vent her initial anger. When she finally paused for breath, I placed my phone on the table between us, open to the screenshots of her conversations with Jake. "I know about the affair, Sarah. I have known since before I left." The color drained from her face. Her denial came automatically. "What are you talking about? What is this?" 7 months with Jake from accounting. Hotel rooms on Wednesdays and Fridays. The weekend in Vermont you told me was a financial conference. I know everything. Her strategy shifted instantly from denial to deflection. "So, you spied on me. You went through my private messages. That is an invasion of privacy, Ronald. That is controlling behavior. Your phone buzzed while you were in the shower. I saw the preview message from Jake. After that, yes, I looked, and I found more than enough." What followed was a textbook display of manipulative tactics. First came trickle truth, admitting to only what she knew I could prove. It was just a few times a mistake. It did not mean anything. When I showed her evidence of the affair's duration, she switched to blame shifting. "You were always working. You stopped paying attention to me." I was lonely, and Jake was there for me emotionally. I had anticipated this response and remained unmoved. I worked the same hours I always had. "You were the one who suddenly started having late nights and weekend conferences." Seeing her usual tactics fail, Sarah tried a new approach: crocodile tears and appeals to our history. 5 years of marriage, Ronald. Does that mean nothing to you? People make mistakes. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. This was not a mistake, Sarah. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something hurtful in anger. This was 7 months of calculated deception, thousands of lies, big and small, every day. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, cycling through anger, tears, and manipulation. I remained firm but calm, refusing to be drawn into an emotional response that could later be used against me. By the end, exhausted by the futility of her tactics, Sarah finally admitted to the full extent of the affair. Yes, it was 7 months. Yes, I lied to you. But disappearing like that was cruel, Ronald. You could have talked to me. We could have worked through it. We are talking now, I replied. And the result is the same. The marriage is over. I left that meeting with a strange sense of power restored. By confronting Sarah on my terms with evidence in hand and emotions under control, I had shifted the dynamic. The ghosting, controversial as it was, had given me the space to approach this confrontation from a position of clarity rather than fresh pain. My next step was confronting Jake. I emailed him directly, attaching some of the evidence I had, requesting a brief meeting. He agreed, likely fearing workplace repercussions if he refused. Our meeting was brief and uncomfortable. Jake appeared genuinely remorseful, admitting that he knew Sarah was married but claimed she had told him our marriage was already effectively over, just not officially. She said you were separating, he explained, unable to meet my eyes. That you stayed together for appearances but lived separate lives. This new information, while painful, only reinforced my decision. Sarah had not only betrayed me with her actions, but had actively revised our entire relationship history to justify her behavior. With the truth now established, I began the process of selective disclosure to those who mattered most. I met with my parents, showing them enough evidence to confirm the infidelity, without subjecting them to the humiliating details. My father, initially my harshest critic, became my strongest supporter. I still think you should have handled it differently, he said, but I understand why you needed space. My sister Julia required more convincing. Her loyalty had been divided, and Sarah had cultivated a close relationship with her over the years. I showed Julia the hotel receipts and some of the less explicit text messages. Her reaction moved from disbelief to anger, not just at Sarah, but partially at me as well. I believe you about the affair, she said, but I still think ghosting was extreme. Do you know how worried we all were? I acknowledged her feelings without apologizing for my actions. I needed time to process without Sarah controlling the narrative. I am sorry for the worry it caused you and Mom and Dad, but I am not sorry for protecting myself. Close friends received similar explanations with varying results. Some, like my college roommate Ryan, immediately offered support and apologized for doubting me. Others maintained that while Sarah's betrayal was wrong, my response had been disproportionate. A few refused to believe the evidence at all, too invested in Sarah's version of events to accept the truth. At work, I kept the explanation professional and brief, simply informing my boss that Sarah and I were divorcing due to infidelity on her part, and that the disruptions would not continue. He seemed relieved to have even this limited context, and assured me my position was secure. Sarah's public persona crumbled once the truth began circulating. Her tearful Facebook post remained online, but now read like a masterclass in manipulation rather than a genuine cry for help. Some mutual friends who had been her strongest supporters now awkwardly distanced themselves from both of us, embarrassed by their role in spreading a false narrative. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward. With evidence of the affair and no children to consider, the legal dissolution of our marriage proceeded without major conflict. Sarah, perhaps realizing that further drama would only damage her reputation, more agreed to reasonable terms. The house was sold, assets divided, and within 6 months of my initial disappearance, our marriage was legally over. In the aftermath, I made the difficult decision to leave Boston entirely. Despite clearing my name with many, the city held too many painful associations. I accepted a job offer in Seattle, drawn by both the professional opportunity and the chance to build a life untainted by the shadow of betrayal. The months that followed brought gradual healing. In Seattle, I found a support group for people who had experienced infidelity, hearing stories both better and worse than mine. I made new friends through work and outdoor activities, relationships built on honesty from the beginning. I even started dating again, cautiously and with greater awareness of both red flags and my own boundaries. Throughout this journey, I reflected often on my decision to ghost Sarah. Had it been the right choice? There are no simple answers. The ghosting protected me from immediate manipulation but created collateral damage in my relationships with others. It gave me space to process my emotions but allowed Sarah's false narrative to flourish temporarily. It was both self-preservation and, viewed from certain angles, an act of emotional revenge. What I came to understand is that in situations of betrayal, there are rarely perfect responses. We do the best we can with the emotional resources available to us in that moment. My ghosting was not ideal, but it was what I needed to protect my dignity and mental health during the most painful experience of my life. The most valuable lesson came not from the betrayal or its aftermath, but from the rebuilding process. I learned that self-respect must precede relationship respect, that forgiveness does not always require reconciliation, that the opinions of others, even those we love, cannot override our own lived experience. And perhaps most importantly, that healing is not a straight line but a messy, non-linear journey with both progress and setbacks. Today, nearly 2 years since discovering those messages on Sarah's phone, I can say that I am genuinely happy again. My life in Seattle bears little resemblance to the one I shared with Sarah, but it is authentic and built on my terms. The pain has faded to a dull ache that surfaces only occasionally, usually when something triggers a specific memory. As for Sarah, we have no contact now. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard she eventually left her job, presumably to escape the association with Jake and the gossip that followed our divorce. The last I heard, she had moved to Chicago to start fresh, just as I had done in Seattle. I wish her neither happiness nor suffering, only the self-awareness to avoid inflicting similar pain on someone else. I realize now that ghosting was neither heroic nor villainous, but simply a human response to an impossible situation. Sometimes, when conventional wisdom fails us, we must write our own rules for survival. Have you ever faced betrayal in a relationship? Would you choose ghosting or direct confrontation? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences and lessons. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, protecting your peace sometimes matters more than meeting others' expectations. If you know someone who might benefit from hearing this perspective, please share this video with them.